You know, I always thought when you grew up, you finally earned a little respect. Like, all those late nights studying, the jobs you hated just to scrape by, that eventually someone would look at you and say, "You did good." I kept waiting for that moment, but in my family, it never came. Instead, it was another Tuesday night at our family diner house, the same crumbling old building where we lived upstairs and worked downstairs. And Jessica, my older sister, was once again the sun we were all expected to orbit around. Jessica, with her easy smile and zero accountability. Jessica, the queen of lost jobs and big dreams with no finish line. Jessica, who brought two adorable kids into this world and somehow turned them into a permanent excuse for why the rest of us had to work harder. And me? I was Sophia, the reliable one, the one who picked up double shifts, who made the books balance, who paid rent, and smiled while doing it. I wasn't resentful, not at first. When I finished my degree in culinary management, I moved back into the upstairs rooms above our diner with the idea that it would just be for a few months. Pay off my loans, save for my own cafe one day. I mean, who better to support than your own family, right? But months turned into years, and slowly, the walls started closing in. It wasn't just the rent, which went from $500 to $650, then $800 without much discussion. It was the little things. Jessica's kids turning my room into a daycare whenever they felt like it. My new chef's knives disappearing into her messy kitchen drawer. The PlayStation I bought for stress relief mysteriously becoming the kids' toy downstairs. The worst part? Every time I tried to draw a line, I became the villain. Patricia, my mother, would tilt her head and say, "Sophia, you're being selfish. You know Jessica's trying her best." Henry, my father, would grunt something about family duty before asking if I could cover another broken fridge repair, since you make good money now. Meanwhile, Jessica flitted from job to job, barista, event planner, Instagram consultant, none lasting more than 6 months. And somehow, despite all her struggles, she lived rent-free with 2 kids, never paying a dime toward utilities or groceries. It all came to a boiling point 2 months ago. We were gathered at the old diner booth, Jessica tapping away on her phone, Mom sipping her second glass of boxed wine, Dad pretending to read invoices he didn't understand. I had just finished a double shift. Grease still clung to my hair, and I smelled like burnt coffee. Henry cleared his throat. "We've been looking at the numbers. Expenses are up. Rent's gotta go up too." "How much?" I asked, already feeling the answer in my bones. 40%. 40%. And why? Because Jessica's kids needed more. Because the utilities were higher. Because family sacrifices for family. Because I could afford it. Jessica didn't even blink. She just smiled sweetly and returned to scrolling through her phone, her manicured nails tapping the screen like it was some joke I didn't get yet. That night, lying awake in my narrow bed, surrounded by someone else's mess, I realized something bitter and beautiful. I wasn't their daughter anymore. I was their paycheck. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't sad about it. I was angry. Quietly, cleanly angry. And that anger wasn't going to make me shout. It was going to make me leave. I didn't rage. I didn't slam doors or yell or announce my intentions like some melodramatic soap opera character. Instead, I planned. Every morning after pulling espresso shots for impatient tourists, I packed a little more of my life away. A backpack stuffed with important papers, my best kitchen gear, a few favorite books. I'd smile, say I was headed to the farmer's market, and slip out the back. Nobody noticed. Jessica was too busy posting inspirational quotes on Instagram. Patricia was too busy micromanaging the waitstaff. Henry was too busy pretending everything was fine. I found a small one-bedroom apartment 15 miles away, over a cute little bakery that always smelled like cinnamon. It wasn't much. A narrow space, cheap linoleum floors, a balcony barely big enough for a chair. but it was mine. The landlord, a retired firefighter named Mr. Blake, didn't blink when I said I needed the place ASAP. In fact, he offered me the first month free when he found out I worked food service. Takes guts, he said. And you look like you've got a plan. He wasn't wrong. I opened a new bank account at a different credit union, forwarded my mail to a secure PO box, changed my phone plan, paid deposits, utilities, everything without once breathing a word at home. The day I moved, I picked my timing perfectly. Jessica and the kids were at a puppet show. Patricia and Henry were catering a retirement party, 2 towns over. I hired a small moving company, just 2 guys and a beat-up truck, and they carefully hauled away what little I truly owned: my mattress, my desk, my kitchen equipment, my books, my computer setup. Everything else, the big TV, I bought for family movie nights, the commercial espresso machine I'd chipped in for, the car Henry guilted me into co-signing, I left behind. Let them keep the trappings. I was done furnishing their delusions. On the worn laminate diner table, I left a plain envelope. Inside, my house keys. A simple note: I've moved out. The items I took were purchased with my own money. I am no longer available for financial support. Please do not contact me for assistance. Then I walked away. I thought the quiet would feel empty. Instead, it felt holy. The backlash hit fast. That evening, I turned on my new phone, a number they didn't know, and opened my email. The subject lines told the story before I even clicked. How could you abandoned us. Jessica and the kids are suffering. You owe us, apparently. When they'd come home and found me gone, router missing, living room TV unplugged, Wi-Fi dead, it caused a full-scale meltdown. The best part? Jessica had to pay for her own Netflix. The horror. The messages were a mix of guilt trips, threats, and bizarre bargaining. Patricia accused me of emotionally damaging the family. Henry threatened to sue me for abandoning my obligations. Not how the law works, Dad. Jessica, bless her entitled heart, demanded that I at least pay for another month of utilities for the kids' sake. I didn't respond. Not once. The following week, the diner's phone number showed up on my missed calls list, 13 times in one day. By week 2, Aunt Cheryl reached out through Facebook Messenger. Apparently, the family was falling behind on the mortgage. Without my $1,200 a month, their tight but manageable budget had collapsed like a house of cards. Aunt Cheryl was blunt. They're saying you stole from them. I know the truth. Stay gone, Sophia. Build your own life. You don't owe them a damn thing. I sat there reading that message over and over, my heart pounding like it finally remembered how to move blood properly again. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't cruel. I was free. At my new apartment, I started unpacking my life, piece by piece. For the first time in years, I put up pictures I actually liked. I bought a ridiculous, colorful couch that didn't match anything but made me happy anyway. I baked cinnamon rolls at midnight without worrying about waking a cranky toddler or a hungover sister. I slept with the windows open, listened to the bakery's morning bustle below, and realized something breathtaking. Peace isn't quiet. It's permission. Permission to rest. Permission to dream. Permission to finally live for yourself. Week 3 after my escape, the real damage started showing. Aunt Cheryl called again, her voice a little lower, a little sharper. They're going under, she said. Mortgage is 2 months behind. Jessica's threatening to sue Patricia for emotional trauma if they get evicted. I almost laughed. Jessica suing anyone would be rich, especially the woman who'd coddled her freeloading for years. Apparently, the diner wasn't doing well either. Without my rent money secretly covering half their overhead, the business had started to bleed. Henry had maxed out 2 credit cards. Patricia was begging distant cousins for emergency loans. And Jessica had to get a real job, not just helping out at the diner for tips, not working on her influencer brand, an actual shift job at a daycare. minimum wage, no tips, no followers, no soft filters. Aunt Cheryl said she cried for 3 hours after her first day. Kids don't even appreciate me, she allegedly wailed. The emails got quieter after that. Not because they stopped blaming me. Oh no. They just realized I wasn't answering. When rage didn't work, they tried guilt. When guilt didn't work, they tried pity. When pity didn't work, they started lying. One day I got an email from Patricia titled, "Family Emergency. Please read it." Opened like a Lifetime movie script. Jessica was in crisis. Henry was sick with worry. The diner was our legacy and needs saving. Could I just lend a little something to keep the lights on? I reread it twice. Not once did she ask how I was doing. Not once did she apologize. Not once did she acknowledge the years they drained me dry. No. In their minds, I wasn't a daughter. I was a bank account with legs. By month 4, the foreclosure notice hit. Public records. I didn't even have to ask Aunt Cheryl. I saw the legal posting online. They had 90 days to vacate or strike a miracle deal with the bank. Spoiler, miracles don't work when you've burned every bridge in town. Eric, sorry Jessica, had moved her family into a dingy 2-bedroom apartment downtown, complete with questionable plumbing and neighbors who held rap battles at 2 a.m. Henry picked up a second job delivering groceries. Patricia tried selling homemade baked goods on Facebook Marketplace. I'll give her credit. Her sourdough starter had more fight in it than she ever showed for her own kids. One evening, as the autumn air started crisping around the edges, I got an unexpected text from Sarah, Jessica's wife. Yeah, Jessica had gotten married the year before I left. Of course they didn't invite me. I was too unstable to be around, apparently. Too full of boundaries. Sarah's message was short, "Thank you. You were right to leave. It's worse than I ever thought." I stared at the screen for a long moment. Not smiling, not gloating, just breathing. Someone else had seen the truth. Finally, by month 5, the entire extended family knew. The house of cards collapsed fully, messily in front of them. Aunt Linda stopped loaning them money. Uncle Greg pulled his sponsorship from the diner. Cousin Melissa, who used to worship Jessica, posted a public rant online about fake family loyalty. And the best part? Nobody blamed me anymore. Not after they saw the receipts, the financial statements, the family meetings Jessica live streamed in a drunken haze, blaming me for her inability to pay rent. They watched the lies crumble in real time. And once the illusion shattered, nobody wanted to help pick up the pieces. I didn't dance on their grave. I didn't throw a party. Instead, I bought myself a big old chocolate cake from the bakery downstairs, poured a glass of wine, lit a candle, and sat quietly at my tiny kitchen table, savoring a victory that didn't need witnesses. Freedom doesn't always look like fireworks. Sometimes, it's a slow, peaceful, inevitable collapse of everything that once held you captive, and the only sound left is your own heartbeat, steady and sure. By month 6, the foreclosure was official. The house where I spent my entire childhood, where every corner held a memory, both good and poisoned, was up for auction. They moved out 2 weeks later. Jessica first, of course, blaming everyone but herself. Patricia and Henry, reluctantly, shuffling into a cramped rental across town. I saw it online. The photos stung a little. Empty rooms, faded paint, the once manicured backyard overrun with weeds. But mostly, I felt free. Like a final chain had snapped quietly, leaving me lighter than I'd ever been. They tried reaching out again, of course. The cycle of messages returned. Guilt, you've turned your back on your family in our time of need. Begging just a small loan to help us get back on our feet. Threats, if you don't help, we'll make sure everyone knows how ungrateful you are. But the thing about freedom, once you taste it, you don't go back. Each message was just more evidence for the folder I kept labeled, proof I made the right choice. Then came the final act of desperation. One chilly November evening, I got a knock on my apartment door. Security cameras caught it. Jessica herself, standing there in a ratty hoodie, shifting nervously, holding the baby carrier in one hand. I didn't open the door. I didn't even breathe loud enough for her to hear. She knocked again, softer, then louder. Finally, she shouted through the door, "It's your fault! You owe us!" I stood in the hallway behind the door, calm and unmoved. It wasn't anger. It wasn't fear. It was sadness. Because once upon a time, I might have opened that door. I might have offered money, a couch to crash on, a second or 10th chance. But that person wasn't here anymore. Jessica left after 20 minutes of muttering and slamming her fist against the doorframe. I filed a police report for harassment, added a copy to my growing folder. A few weeks later, Aunt Cheryl called again. This time, it wasn't about drama. She just wanted to check on me. How's the new place? How's the new life? And for once, I had real answers. The new place? Homie, mine, the new life, quiet, free. I told her about the new promotion at work, the classes I was taking just for fun pottery, of all things, the friends I was finally making without worrying about being judged or drained. She laughed. "You sound lighter, kiddo." And I realized I was. I wasn't carrying them anymore, wasn't dragging the weight of their expectations behind me like rusted chains. I was just myself, and that was enough. Holidays came and went. No invites, no angry voicemails. Silence. Blessed, beautiful silence. I made my own traditions. Baked cookies with friends. Sent out cards to people who actually wanted to hear from me. Built a life that had nothing to do with blood ties or toxic loyalty. Sometimes, late at night, I wondered if Patricia and Henry sat in their tiny rental, blaming me for the ruin of their kingdom. If Jessica cried over lost opportunities she thought she deserved without earning. But most of the time, I didn't think about them at all. Their story ended the moment I closed the door behind me and walked into my own future. One last thing happened before the year ended. An envelope arrived in my mailbox. No return address. Inside was a photo. The house, boarded up, graffiti scrawled across the porch, a foreclosure sign swinging crookedly in the winter wind. On the back, written in shaky handwriting, "Hope you're happy." I smiled, folded the photo in half, dropped it in the trash without a second thought. Because happiness, it wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about watching them fall. It was about standing on my own 2 feet, untethered and unstoppable. It was about finally knowing, in my bones, that I didn't owe anyone anything but myself. And that was worth more than any house, any inheritance, any false promises of family. A year passed, then 2. And in that time, my life transformed into something unrecognizable, in the best way. No more borrowed dreams. No more leeches hiding behind the word family. Just me, creating the kind of life I'd always been told I wasn't allowed to have. I bought my first house 6 months after that final letter. Nothing fancy. A small 2-bedroom tucked away in a quiet neighborhood. Sunlight poured into the living room every morning. The backyard smelled like lilac in the spring. It was mine, paid for with my hard work, decorated with my choices. No freeloaders, no guilt trips, no constant nagging about how much I owed anyone. The silence in that house was different, not empty, peaceful, full of my own laughter, the buzz of my favorite records, the soft clatter of a keyboard as I built the future I wanted. Eric, sorry Jessica, eventually fell off the map. Last I heard through Aunt Cheryl, Jessica and her kids were bouncing between apartments, burning bridges faster than they could build them, still blaming everyone else, still waiting for a handout that wasn't coming. Patricia and Henry filed for bankruptcy. They sold off everything, heirlooms, jewelry, even the old wedding china no one ever used but guarded like treasure. Aunt Cheryl said they moved into a tiny senior apartment complex on the outskirts of town, a place that smelled like bleach and broken dreams. I didn't visit, didn't send flowers, didn't even send a Christmas card. Some endings don't need a parade, they just need peace. In my new home, I started hosting game nights with friends, cookouts on sunny weekends, movie marathons that went until 3 a.m. Real family, built from laughter and choice instead of blood and obligation. It still amazes me how different love feels when it's given freely instead of demanded. How community blooms naturally when you stop watering dead soil and start tending to yourself. One night, about 3 years after I'd left, I found myself sitting out on my back porch. It was late. The sky stretched out dark and endless, speckled with stars. I thought about how, once upon a time, I believed that staying, suffering silently, was loyalty. That bleeding out my paycheck, my time, my sanity, was the price of being a good son. What a lie that was. I wasn't a bad person for leaving. I wasn't selfish for refusing to be drained dry. I wasn't cruel for wanting a life that didn't revolve around being someone else's safety net. Freedom isn't selfish. Freedom is sacred. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is walk away from people who will never see you as anything but a tool. Last month, I got a small card in the mail. No return address. Just 4 words written inside. "We miss you, Marcus." No apology. No ownership. Just a soft tug at old chains they thought might still bind me. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I didn't even respond. Instead, I walked to my backyard, stood under the stars, and let the cool night air fill my lungs. I am not your mule. I am not your scapegoat. I am not your sacrifice. I whispered the words into the sky. Not for them, for me. A prayer, a promise, a truth. Today, my life is full. My work challenges me in ways that make me excited to wake up. My friends cheer my wins and hold me steady through losses. My own little traditions, Sunday pancakes, Wednesday night writing sprints, long hikes on crisp autumn mornings, anchor me. I'm building something new, brick by careful brick. Not the hollow castle they tried to trap me in, but a real life. One that I chose and choose every single day. And if anyone asks me what it cost, I'll tell them the truth. Walking away cost me people who never truly loved me. But it gave me everything else. And it was worth every single step. Story 2, when I first met Emma, she was 22, full of energy, wild ideas, and an infectious laugh that could pull you out of any bad day. I was 24, fresh into my career as a registered nurse, and thought I'd found someone I could build a life with. Fast forward 5 years later, and I was carrying our entire life on my back, while Emma slowly disintegrated into someone I barely recognized. Emma had dropped out of college 2 years into our relationship. At first, she promised it was temporary, just taking a break to figure things out. I supported her, I loved her, I believed her. But as months turned into years, that break morphed into a full-time lifestyle. A lifestyle that involved spending entire days in bed, binge-watching TV shows, ordering takeout 3 meals a day, and refusing to even shower unless I prompted her. Meanwhile, I was clocking 50, 60-hour weeks at the hospital, battling burnout and emotional exhaustion just to keep the lights on. Every day, I'd come home to chaos. Trash piling up, laundry half finished, Emma still in her pajamas. One evening, after an especially brutal 14-hour shift, I walked through the door to find her buried under a mountain of fast food wrappers. No greeting, no smile, just her grunting at me to close the door because it's drafty. Something inside me snapped. I told her, firmly but not cruelly, that she couldn't keep living like this, that she needed to get a job, or go back to school, or at least try. She responded by throwing a pillow at me, sobbing hysterically, and then threatening to hurt herself, grabbing a pair of scissors, brandishing them like a threat to both of us. I froze. I didn't call her bluff. Instead, I backed down. I apologized. I promised to stay, for now. But inside, I knew it was over. The next day, I decided it was time. I sat her down that night, fully dressed, standing across the room from her, while she bounced on the bed like a child, oblivious to the storm she'd summoned. At first, she didn't take me seriously. Then, slowly, she realized I wasn't playing around. I told her I couldn't do this anymore. I explained that I felt alone, that the woman I loved seemed long gone, that the endless waiting for her to find motivation had chipped away at my respect, my patience, and finally, my feelings. Emma cried, begged, made promises she couldn't possibly keep. She swore she would apply for jobs, swore she'd enroll in classes, swore she'd find hobbies. And for a brief, painful moment, a part of me wanted to believe her, that maybe this time would be different, that maybe this was the wake-up call she needed. But another, colder part of me knew better. I told her the truth. I didn't feel love anymore. Not the kind that makes you stay. Not the kind that forgives everything. Just emptiness. Emma was devastated. Through tears and snot and trembling hands, she asked for one more chance. 2 months, she begged. She said she'd change everything if I'd just give her 2 months. If she failed, then I'd be free to walk away. But she needed that time to prove she could be the woman I once fell in love with. Against my better judgment, I agreed. Maybe out of guilt, maybe out of cowardice, maybe because part of me still didn't know how to let go. For the first time in months, Emma slept on the floor next to the couch where I had retreated. She refused to leave my side, whispering apologies until exhaustion finally pulled her under. I lay awake most of that night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if giving someone one last chance was noble or just prolonging the inevitable. The next few days were strange. Emma was attentive in a way she hadn't been in years. She clung to every word I said. She constantly asked how I was feeling, what I needed, what she could do better. It didn't feel romantic. It didn't even feel real. It felt desperate. And deep down, I knew you can't rebuild love on desperation. You can't fix a broken house by throwing new paint over the rot. Still, part of me wondered, maybe if she really tried, maybe if she found a piece of herself again, maybe it wasn't too late. I didn't expect the memory to surface during one of our conversations. The memory that, in truth, had sealed Emma's fate in my heart long before she realized it. It was my first year at the hospital, an endless slog of night shifts, trauma patients, and brutal learning curves. I would come home after 14-hour days completely drained, physically, mentally, emotionally. And every single time I'd find Emma exactly where I left her, in bed, scrolling mindlessly through her phone. No meal waiting, no effort made, not even a hug most nights. That was when the resentment had started growing. Not because she wasn't working, but because she wasn't trying. While I was pouring every ounce of myself into survival, she was content to rot. And eventually I realized I didn't want to rot with her. By the end of our first week in this new trial period, Emma came to me with a list of hobbies she wanted to try. Photography, cooking, maybe even a few online courses. She showed me screenshots of job applications she had submitted. She promised she was serious, that she could change. And to be fair, she was trying harder than I'd seen her try in years. But love isn't a faucet you can just turn back on. And no amount of new hobbies could wash away the damage already done. As the month ticked on, I kept my distance. I stayed sleeping on the couch. I encouraged her without promising anything. I honored my word. Give her 2 months, see if my heart could be convinced. But deep down, I knew. Love isn't something you resurrect by force. Sometimes, love quietly dies when no one is paying attention. And by the time you realize it's gone, there's nothing left to save. At first, Emma's sudden burst of energy seemed promising. She wasn't just talking, she was actually doing things. She bought a starter camera with her saved-up money from selling old clothes online. She started taking walks around the city, snapping photos of strangers, buildings, trees. She even offered to cook. It wasn't anything gourmet, but the effort was there. Simple pasta dishes, scrambled eggs, grilled cheese sandwiches. For a while, it almost felt normal. Like maybe the person I once loved was clawing her way back into existence. But something about the way she was doing it didn't sit right with me. It wasn't organic. It wasn't joyful. It was frantic. Like she was sprinting toward a finish line she thought could save her. Every smile was forced. Every laugh a little too sharp around the edges. Every hour of every day, she tried to prove she was worthy again, as if love could be earned through effort alone, as if checking the right boxes would erase years of resentment and exhaustion. I tried to meet her halfway, like I promised. I went on her photography walks. I ate the slightly burnt dinners. I answered every text she sent asking how my day was. But deep inside, nothing had shifted. The part of me that used to light up when I saw her was still cold, unreachable, and pretending otherwise just made me feel cruel. As the weeks wore on, Emma's anxiety started bleeding through the cracks. She would stare at me when she thought I wasn't looking, searching my face for any tiny sign of affection. She clung to every word I said, twisting casual comments into desperate hopes. One night, she sat me down and asked, "Have your feelings changed at all?" I didn't know how to answer. I didn't want to lie, but I didn't want to destroy her either. So I told her the truth. "I appreciate what you're doing, Emma. I see it. But I don't know. I really don't know." She nodded, like she understood, but I could see the devastation in her eyes. And that's when the breakdown started. It began with small things. Tears over little arguments. Panic attacks when I was 5 minutes late coming home. Accusations that I didn't care, that I was already looking for someone new. I reassured her where I could, but my heart wasn't in it. How do you comfort someone when you're the very source of their pain? The night it all fell apart, I came home late after grabbing dinner with coworkers. Emma was waiting in the dark, sitting on the couch like a ghost. When I walked in, she barely looked at me. Her voice was flat, hollow. "Where were you?" I explained. "Just dinner with friends. Nothing secret, nothing shady. But it didn't matter. You're just counting down the days until you can leave me," she whispered. I told her no, that wasn't true. But it was, in a way. We both knew it. She started to cry, then scream, and then beg me to stay. Beg me to tell her there was still hope. Beg me not to throw her away. I tried to stay calm. I tried to remind her she was strong enough to stand on her own. But the more I spoke, the more she unraveled. Until finally, between broken sobs, she said the words that froze the blood in my veins. "If you leave, there's no point to anything. I won't survive it." That night, I sat on the floor outside our bedroom door while she cried herself to sleep inside. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I stared at the wall until sunrise, heart pounding, brain running in helpless circles. I realized then, this wasn't love anymore. This wasn't even a relationship anymore. It was a hostage situation, and we were both the hostages. The next day, I packed a small bag, enough for a few nights away. I needed space to breathe, to think. When Emma finally emerged from the bedroom, puffy-eyed and hollow, I told her gently but firmly that I was moving out, that it was over, that I wished her nothing but good things, but I couldn't be her lifeline anymore. She didn't scream this time. She didn't cry. She just stared at me like she was watching the world end. And in a way, she was. At least the world we had built. For the next few weeks, I stayed on a friend's couch, trying to piece myself back together. Emma texted sometimes. Nothing desperate, just little updates. She got a part-time job at a grocery store. She was taking more photos. She was doing better. I didn't reply. Not because I was angry, but because I needed to heal, too. Love isn't always a clean break. Sometimes it's a slow bleeding out you barely survive. But you do survive. You move forward. Even when your heart still aches for what could have been. The month passed faster than I thought it would. When you're hurting, time doesn't slow down for you. It just moves in its own strange rhythm, like the river after a storm, wild, uncaring. I found an apartment across town. Small, just enough space for me and the quiet. I didn't tell Emma where I was moving. I think she understood that, even without me saying it out loud. In the last few days before I left, we barely spoke. There were no more long conversations, no more hopeful talks about what could be fixed. Just short exchanges about bills, logistics, loose ends. I think both of us knew that anything else would be too painful. There are goodbyes that are loud, messy, tearful. And then there are goodbyes like ours, a slow fading out, a ghost slipping into the trees. The morning I packed up my final boxes, Emma just watched from the kitchen. She didn't try to stop me. She didn't beg. She just stood there, arms wrapped around herself, eyes swollen and tired. When I carried the last box to my car, she followed me outside. The sun was just coming up, casting long shadows across the cracked driveway. She cleared her throat like she wanted to say something, but no words came out. Instead, she just nodded once, a small, broken movement, and I nodded back. That was it. No promises, no false hopes. Just two people standing at the edge of what used to be their life together, quietly letting it go. The first night in my new place, I couldn't sleep. The silence was too loud. No soft footsteps. No half-mumbled words from another room. No weight of another person existing beside me. I lay awake for hours, thinking about Emma. About how love alone isn't enough if it's dragging you both underwater. About how sometimes leaving isn't the cruel thing, staying is. For weeks, she stayed in my dreams. Not in the way of longing, but in that heavy way that old grief lives in your bones. I would see her smiling face from better days, and I'd wake up with my chest tight, heart aching for something that didn't exist anymore. Healing isn't a straight path. It twists and doubles back and leaves you feeling lost some days. But the only way out is through. A few months later, I heard from a mutual friend that Emma was still working at the grocery store, that she had started taking community college classes, photography, just like she had wanted, that she was surviving, not thriving, not yet, but living. And maybe, for her, that was a start. I didn't reach out, it wasn't my place anymore. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone you once loved is leave them alone. As for me, life moved forward. Not quickly, not dramatically, just steadily. I focused on my work. I made new friends. I started hiking again, something I had given up years ago without even realizing. The loneliness faded, little by little. The heavy memories dulled around the edges, and eventually, I realized. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't even sad. I was just free. Love, when it's real, should lift you up. It should feed your soul, not starve it. And sometimes the greatest act of love, both for yourself and for the other person, is knowing when to walk away. I don't hate Emma. I never will. She wasn't a monster. She wasn't evil. She was just lost. And for a long time, I was lost with her. But I found my way back. And maybe, somewhere out there, she's finding hers too. The river flows on, even after the storm. The sun rises again, even after the darkest night. And people heal, even from the kind of love that almost broke them. One step at a time, one breath at a time. Forward, always forward. Story 3, my mother-in-law, Marlene, has always been the kind of person who thought the world owed her something. And my wife, Heather, was raised to believe that indulging her was just part of being a good daughter. It was the toxic combination that wore down our marriage piece by piece, year after year. The final straw? Marlene stole my most prized possession, my vintage key collection, and sold it for pocket change. And when I said I was pressing charges, Heather showed her true colors. I should back up a bit. I'm 34 now, a software engineer, and Heather's 32, a freelance graphic designer who only worked sporadically. Marlene, meanwhile, is in her late 60s, retired, but has spent her golden years leeching off her daughter instead of actually enjoying them. It had been a rocky road for a while. Marlene was constantly inserting herself into our lives, asking for money, crashing our date nights, making passive-aggressive comments whenever Heather wasn't around. Heather always asked me to be patient with her, but patience wears thin when it becomes expected without end. About 3 months ago, Marlene demanded that I buy her a new phone. Her old one was apparently 2 years old, ancient, in her mind. I told her no. She threw an actual tantrum in our living room, like getting on the floor, pounding her fists like a spoiled toddler. Tantrum. I stood there, stunned, refusing to budge. When she realized it wasn't working, she stormed out, shouting, "I'll be getting what I want. You'll see." I didn't think much of it at the time. She was always pulling melodramatic stunts when she didn't get her way. Fast forward a few days later, I came home from work, ready to finally relax after a grueling day. The second I walked through the door, I knew something was wrong. The cabinet that housed my key collection, my pride and joy, a decade's worth of hunting down rare skeleton keys at estate sales, antique shops, auctions, was forced open. The lock was mangled, the glass door shattered, and the keys, hundreds of them, were gone. I felt like the floor fell out from under me. I tore through the house, looking for any sign that this wasn't real, that somehow I was misunderstanding what I was seeing. Then I remembered Heather had given Marlene a copy of our house key when we first moved in, without asking me. It didn't take a genius to connect the dots. I pulled up our home security footage. There she was, Marlene, breaking into the cabinet with a crowbar and stuffing my keys into a plastic shopping bag like they were loose junk. I called her immediately. No answer. I texted, furious, demanding she return what she stole. Her reply, "Sold 'em. Got myself a new phone. You should have just bought me one when I asked. Your collection was ugly anyway. LOL." I was shaking with rage. I showed Heather the footage and the messages when she got home. At first, she seemed horrified. She apologized, promised she'd talk to her mother. But when I told her I was calling the police, everything changed. Heather begged me not to. "It's family. We can work this out." She suggested I just start a new collection. "It'll be a fun project for you." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. 10 years of work, of personal milestones, of memories, and she wanted me to just let it go? I made up my mind. I called the police. They actually took it seriously, far more than I expected. I had everything lined up. The video footage, the text messages where Marlene basically confessed, and even photos documenting the collection's value. An officer showed up at our house, took my statement, and promised to follow up. Later that evening, they arrested Marlene at her home. Turns out, she sold my entire collection at a pawn shop for a grand total of $300. My appraiser had valued the collection at somewhere between $2,000 and $3,000. The pawn shop owner, realizing how valuable the keys might be, had already separated them into lots to maximize profit. But thankfully, because of the quick police work and the blatant evidence against Marlene, the pawn shop surrendered everything to the authorities without a fight. When the officer returned my keys 2 days later, I nearly cried from relief. Of course, getting my collection back didn't fix everything. The cabinet Marlene destroyed was beyond repair. It was a cheap secondhand piece, but it still hurt to see it mangled like that. And more importantly, Heather's reaction to all of this told me everything I needed to know about our future. She didn't yell. She didn't scream. She just shut down, packed a small suitcase, looked at me like I was a stranger, and left for a motel without saying another word. She texted me the next morning demanding I transfer money to help bail Marlene out. When I refused, she sarcastically replied, "Wow. Thanks, Adam." I felt nothing but emptiness reading that message. Something inside me broke that day. The man who had once been willing to forgive and look the other way, for the sake of peace, for the sake of love, was gone. Heather had made her choice, and now I was going to make mine. Divorce. The morning after Heather's text, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the half-empty cup of coffee in my hands, feeling like a fool. 7 years married, 10 years together. And now, it was unraveling because I had the audacity to stand up for myself, for something that mattered to me. I didn't even have the energy to get angry anymore. I just felt hollow. I called my bank first thing, pulled my money out of the joint account, froze the automatic payments, made it clear the only money left in that account was Heather's now. Then I called the landlord. I told them about the change in situation, about Marlene's illegal entry in the police report. They weren't exactly thrilled to hear the drama tied to one of their tenants, but when I asked permission to change the locks, they agreed without much hesitation. By noon, I had new locks installed on every door. I sat down, locked the door behind me, and finally breathed out. It wasn't much, but it was a start. That afternoon, I met with a divorce lawyer named Dana. Sharp woman. Older, seasoned, no-nonsense type. Exactly what I needed. She sat across from me, tapping a pen against a legal pad, listening carefully as I spilled everything, from the stolen key collection to the motel drama to the money Heather drained from our account. When I finished, Dana asked one question. "Are you sure you're ready to walk away?" I didn't even hesitate, I'm sure. She nodded, scribbled something on her notepad, and said, "Good. Let's get started." The next week was a blur. Filing paperwork, gathering documents, blocking Heather's desperate text messages, alternating between angry rants and sappy promises to fix this. I didn't respond to any of them, not even the ones where she claimed she was finally ready to prioritize me over her mother. Too late. The damage was already done. The day Heather was served the divorce papers, I stayed out of the house on purpose. Let her sit with it alone. When I got back that evening, she was sitting at the kitchen counter, red-eyed and furious. "You really went through with it," she said, voice cracking. I nodded, walking past her to grab a bottle of water from the fridge. "You're destroying our family," she spat. I laughed once, short and bitter. "What family, Heather? Your mom's not my family." She never was. She flinched like I'd slapped her, but she didn't argue. She just sat there, crumbling in slow motion, while I turned my back and walked down the hall. The next few days were tense. Heather moved into the spare bedroom. She slammed doors. She muttered under her breath whenever we crossed paths. One night, I found her crying quietly in the living room, clutching an old wedding photo. For half a second, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered every time she chose Marlene over me. Every time she minimized my feelings, dismissed my concerns, let her mother run wild in our home. No. She made her bed. Now she could lie in it. It didn't take long for the real battle to begin. Heather demanded I drop the charges against Marlene. Said it was family business and didn't belong in court. I told her flat out. Marlene broke the law. She's facing the consequences. End of story. Heather screamed at me, an ugly, guttural sound, and accused me of being vindictive. I just stared at her calmly and said, "I'm being fair. That's more than either of you deserve." After that, she didn't bother asking again. Instead, she got sneakier. First, she tried to guilt trip me. Little notes left around the house. Old photos of happier times taped to the fridge. Her wedding ring left conspicuously on my nightstand, like a silent accusation. When that didn't work, she escalated. She started walking around the house half-dressed, cooking my favorite meals, badly, and pretending like nothing had happened. One night, she even tried to crawl into bed with me. I locked the door after that. It was pathetic, really. Watching her flail around, desperately trying to claw back something she herself had shattered. I felt nothing. Meanwhile, Marlene was doing what Marlene always did, playing the victim. Heather told me through gritted teeth that Marlene blamed me for ruining her life, for taking away her freedom, whatever that meant. Apparently, her social security and food stamps weren't enough anymore. Without Heather bankrolling her like before, she was floundering. I had zero sympathy. Marlene was a grown woman who made her own mess. She could figure out how to clean it up. Or not. Not my problem. Around this time, I learned something else. Something that almost made me laugh out loud. Heather had been planning. before all this blew up, to move Marlene into our home full-time, without even talking to me about it. She was just going to do it. Wait until I was at work, then help Marlene move in her hoarder crap while I was gone. When I confronted her about it, she actually tried to defend herself. She's family. It's what families do. I shook my head in disbelief. You don't bulldoze your partner's life for the sake of family. You talk about it. You compromise. You treat your spouse like an equal. Heather just stared at me, wide-eyed and silent, like I was speaking a foreign language. It was clear then, if it hadn't been already, that our marriage had never been a true partnership. It had been a hostage situation, and I was the one chained to the wall. I stopped spending time at the house whenever I could, found excuses to stay late at work, grabbed dinner with friends. Hell, sometimes I just sat in my car at the park, scrolling mindlessly on my phone for an hour. Anything was better than being trapped in that house with Heather's simmering resentment. Meanwhile, my lawyer Dana kept the wheels turning. She was a machine, efficient, relentless, completely unbothered by Heather's half-hearted attempts to delay the process. Every time Heather tried to stir up drama, filing baseless complaints, making empty threats, Dana shut it down without breaking a sweat. I was endlessly grateful for that. For once, someone had my back. As the weeks dragged on, the silence between Heather and me grew thicker, heavier. It was a waiting game now. Counting down the days until the lease ended. Counting down the days until the divorce was finalized. Freedom was so close I could almost taste it. March rolled in cold and gray. The lease was almost up, and every box I packed felt like lifting a stone off my chest. Freedom was close enough now that I could smell it in the air, clean, crisp, like rain after a fire. The night before my move-out date, Heather cornered me in the kitchen. No makeup, eyes puffy from crying, voice so hoarse I barely recognized it. "Please," she whispered, "one last chance. Don't leave like this." I didn't raise my voice, didn't even look angry. I just said, "I'm not the one who destroyed this marriage, Heather. You are." She started crying harder, blaming Marlene, blaming me, blaming the world. Everyone's fault but her own. I let her cry. I didn't offer a hug. I didn't say a single comforting word. Some storms you just have to let pass on their own. When the movers showed up the next morning, Heather stood at the window watching, arms crossed, stone-faced, silent. I packed my life into a truck, my books, my computer, my old battered couch, the guest bed, my key collection now tucked securely inside a locked safe. Everything else, the furniture, the dishes, the fake smiles and broken promises, I left behind. I handed the landlord my key that afternoon. Told him thank you for letting me change the locks early. Told him good luck with the next tenants. He shook my hand, gave me a sad little nod. He didn't say it, but I could tell he understood. Some endings are blessings. The new apartment was nothing fancy. Small, plain, still smelled like fresh paint and sawdust. But it was mine. No one else's keys floating around. No screaming matches. No walking on eggshells every time I opened the door. Just four walls, a roof, and the quiet kind of peace you don't realize you've been missing until you finally taste it again. I slept better that first night than I had in years. I stayed busy after the move. Work picked up. I picked up too, bought a used bicycle, started riding it to the hospital. It felt good. Simple. Like reclaiming a part of myself I didn't even know I'd lost. Some nights, I'd ride aimlessly through the neighborhoods, just feeling the wind hit my face. No destination, no noise, no drama, just me and the road and the rhythm of the tires against the pavement. Meanwhile, back at the old house, everything fell apart faster than I expected. Heather couldn't afford the rent without me. Even with Marlene back in the picture, dragging her hoarded garbage behind her. The landlord, true to his word, refused to renew the lease once he found out Marlene had moved in. He served them notice, gave them 30 days to vacate. Heather didn't tell me any of this directly. I heard it through the grapevine. Mutual acquaintances still tangled up in the mess I'd escaped. Apparently, she tried everything. begging, threatening, offering extra deposits. But it didn't matter. Nobody wants to deal with a hoarder or an entitled adult child clinging to mommy's apron strings. They ended up moving into a run-down rental 2 towns over. Word was, it wasn't much better than Marlene's old house. Roaches, mold, broken plumbing. Somehow, it felt fitting. Like the universe itself was finally handing out overdue consequences. The divorce finalized 2 months later. Dana called me one afternoon while I was biking home from work. "It's done," she said simply. I just stood there for a minute, staring at the sunset bleeding across the sky, feeling nothing. Not joy, not sadness, not even anger. Just this deep, still quiet inside me. The kind you only find after a long, ugly storm finally passes. Heather didn't contest anything in the end. Too broke, too defeated, too busy trying to pick up the pieces of her own self-made disaster. We didn't speak again after that. Not once. Not even a drunk text at midnight. It was like she just vanished from my life. And honestly, I was fine with that. Some people are meant to be lessons, not lifelines. I kept the keys. The skeleton key collection, the ones Marlene had tried to destroy. They sat in a new, sturdier case in my apartment, where no one but me had access. Sometimes I'd stand there, running my fingers over the old iron and brass, thinking about all the doors they once opened, thinking about all the doors I had to close to finally find my own. It wasn't just the marriage I walked away from, it was the weight of it all. The years spent trying to fix people who didn't want to be fixed, the resentment, the loneliness of being second best in your own life. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. I was free. One night, months later, sitting on my tiny balcony with a cold drink and a full moon overhead, I thought about Heather for the first time in a long time. I didn't miss her. I missed who I thought she was, who I hoped she could be. But that person never really existed, and that's okay, because now I knew better. Now I had the scars to prove it. And next time, if there ever was a next time, I would choose better. I would choose myself.